Now is 12:20. Hold on, yes, just one sec. Coming. Who is it? Hey, not right now, Jimmy.
To the wind of my soul.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Let me speak to them. If it's a...
Hello?
Yes, who am I speaking with? Hi, Wayne. It's David calling again. There's a fellow here from Fresh Start named Bruce, and it's his first day on the job, and he doesn't know where things are. He looked for the salt and the shovel or pick and couldn't find anything. And I said I would try and reach you and see if there is any way to get access to those things, or if the contractor brings them with them, and what we should do, because it's still pretty icy out there. Okay, go in the garbage room in the basement, okay. In the compactor room, okay. Okay, it's in a bag, okay, cool. Oh, great, so I'll tell him that, because he's leaving at 1. And he said he'd be happy to do it, so that's cool. Oh, you're coming here? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Because I'm thinking if we salt it now, then maybe if by the time you come later, if you could shovel it. Oh, you guys don't do the shoveling and salting. Okay. Okay, so that's up to Fresh Start, do you know the contractor's name? Because it'd be nice if somebody could tell them, that to try and get here faster next time. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll do that. Thanks a lot, and we'll do that as soon as possible. Thanks, man. Bye. Yeah, just a sec. It's now 12:25. I gotta go talk. Okay, I'll put those on for you, and then I gotta go, okay? Friday's message. 2:40 p.m. Monday. Friday message. Message in a bottle. Friday message is still on. Monday at 2:40.
Sing you a song, baby, I'll travel. Winds glide me over the Rockies towards home, and find me a lover I can lay next to, and maybe then I'll lose the pain. Loneliness is all that I'm feeling. As I get older, it feels it's more often. Hiding when my friends are around. With laughter and drink, this feeling I'll drown. This feeling I'll drown. So I sing you a song. Maybe I'll travel. Winds glide me over the Rockies towards home, and find me a lover I can lay next to, and maybe then I'll lose the pain. Homesick for the warm sunny weather, my family, the country, the Golden Gate Bridge. I think of the days I once lived there. I've spent too much time here, no more can I bear. No more can I bear. So I sing you a song. Maybe I'll travel. Winds glide me over the Rockies towards home, and find me a lover I can lay next to, and maybe then I lose the pain. Anxious when I think of the future, afraid of mistakes I make in my life. I'm moved by the planets and forces. Do I rule my own life, or is it destiny's course? Destiny's course. So I sing you a song. Maybe I'll travel. Winds glide me over the Rockies towards home, and find me a lover I can lay next to, and maybe then I'll lose the pain that's making me blue, that's making me blue. The best in new age, new traditional, and jazz is here for you on From the Eastern Door. Join me, your host, Patrice Mousseau, and share the music and knowledge of the Aboriginal community. From the Eastern Door, only on ABRN, The Earth.
Could be good things in the air. healthy dose of wax.
This is the Q107 Top 107 Albums of All Time Classic Rock Extra Long Weekend.
Classic Rock, Q107.
Best laid plan. Swing low.
Here's another gem on the Q107 Top 107 Albums of All Time. Classic Rock Extra Long Weekend. Only from Classic Rock Q107.
Q107. Again, we go deep into the music with another album side 2 of Neil Young's 1972 release Harvest, wrapping up with Words Between the Lines of Age. Preceded by one of the big hits off of the album, The Needle and the Damage Done, as well as Alabama, There's a World, and the other big hit off of the Neil Young Harvest album, kicking off side 2 with Old Man. And Neil Young's old man, Scott Young, a very famous individual in his own right as a sports writer here in Toronto, as well as some of the great hockey books that he wrote when we were kids. And another one of the albums we had to flip a coin. What side do you go with, side 1 or side 2 of Harvest? Side 1 full of great tracks as well. Well, we flipped the coin, it was tails, and we went with side 2. We get album sides each and every hour for you. Here on Q107, it began Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. It will continue throughout today, throughout tomorrow, throughout Psychedelic Sunday. And it will eventually culminate Monday morning beginning at 9 o'clock when we take the albums that you have voted for at Q107.com, the Q107 listeners, the top 10 albums of all time. And we will count them down Monday morning at 9 from album number 10 right through to album number 1. 29 minutes past 9. Andy Frost here till noon. Kelly going to be in at that time here on this final day of 2004. Again, Q107 Toronto weather. You may want to be cognizant of this to make some New Year's Eve plans. In fact, it's going to be so nice out tonight. There's going to be maybe more people outside on this New Year's Eve tonight than in recent memory. Cloudy with showers this morning, up to 9 degrees. This afternoon, variable clouds. We will now get up to a high of plus 11. This evening, plus 6, mainly clear. Overnight tonight, cloudy periods and minus 2. For New Year's Day tomorrow, cloudy, sunny breaks, a high of plus 3. Sunday, January 2nd, cloudy showers and a high of plus 5. Still some light rain falling here in downtown Toronto this hour. The rain should clear out by around the noon hour. Currently sitting at 8 degrees. Thing only to be maybe made aware of on this day is it will remain windy right through the afternoon, and by tonight it's going to be picking up some steam as well. The wind this hour at around 25 kilometers an hour coming out of the southwest, so nothing really to be all that concerned about. On the way, we're going to be hearing from the band that was known as Saga. In fact, they still are known as Saga. Also with the Earth Band, we'll hear from Manfred Mann, and all we are the radio station that has the man that you'll hear next as our afternoon drive host.
Club Q. Hey, it's Andrew from Club Q. Now, I'm no evil Knievel. Seriously, bumper cars freak me out. But I'm all for watching motorcycles fly through the air. And that's what you'll see at the Classic Rock Freestyle Motocross event at Monster Jam 2005. Check this out. The Mighty Q wants to put you in your own private box at the Toronto Area Ford Dealers Monster Jam, Sunday, January 16th. You'll catch all the action, including monster trucks like Gravedigger, plus the all-new 2005 Freestyle Motocross, where top riders hurl themselves 80 feet in the air, a private box, aerial acrobats, and classic rock. And all you have to do is log on to Q107.com and join Club Q for a chance to score it all. Don't miss Monster Jam, January 15th and 16th at Skydome. Get your motor running and hit Q107.com now.
Club Q, only from Classic Rock, Q107.
We all know where Canada's proper place in alpine ski racing is, right at the top, which is why Pontiac and GMC proudly support the Canadian Alpine Ski Team and young Canadian skiers in the Pontiac GMC Cup Camp.
You know, either you took it beforehand, so you took it maybe on the 24th or somewhere in between Christmas and New Year's so that you could have like that week off in between the two, or you're taking it today sort of thing. So if you're wondering, hey, what is going on? That's it. I mean, the stat is, is considered to be today. So government offices and stuff will be closed today. And a lot of businesses will be closed or working on a very slim staff, and kids are back to school, which that is just very strange because that just never happens. 6:44, we've got traffic and weather next.
What's new at home with Canes?
Nothing but the best.
Down
It's not just a city hall responsibility. It's if you want to call it, I've heard the phrase before, an equation of co-responsibility between the city and its citizens.
Let's talk about what might be within City Hall's responsibility. Can you crane your neck and just see the screen of my computer? This is an email that I just got from Suzanne McCormick. She lives in South Riverdale, and she's talking about a corner in her neighborhood near Carlaw. I'll just show you and describe what we're looking at. This is a corner on Carlaw, which is plastered with billboards, especially for a new garment factory loft development. There's one. There's another. See that? She's got a third here. What she's addressing, look at that horrible thing, garment factory lofts. Basically, is there any way to reclaim the public space that is being covered in advertising, whether it's high-style electronic advertising or just monstrous advertising billboards like this?
The whole idea of the street furniture is one that we're going to be attacking this year.
Now, when you say attack, is it within the power of City Hall to tell the people of the garment factory lofts that they cannot uglify our city by covering two sides of a 5-story building with an ad? Can you do that?
Well, there are regulations that we have in place that deal with signage, advertising, whether it's third-party advertising or whether it's advertising like that.
Do you have the power to get rid of that? I mean, what use is it creating a little parquet at the bottom of that picture if the top of it, if the sky is obliterated by that sign?
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at now, is the way in which we can regulate those kinds of signs. We can't regulate the content, but we certainly regulate the location and the size of the signage that's there, whether it's illuminated or otherwise. Those kinds of things are temporary, to say the least, but they're
everywhere.
They are, and the kind of advertising that you're looking at there is something which can appear literally overnight, and we, quite frankly, don't have enough inspectors out on the street.
Do you think? What we're looking at?
I really don't know. It seems to me to be a bit oversized, quite a bit oversized, as a matter of fact. So if we can get information on things like that, we can dispatch inspectors to make sure that the signage does have proper permits and meets the bylaws that are in place.
Pierre Giorgio DiCicco also asked the question when we heard him speak that night at City Hall, whether or not Toronto asks of itself as it accepts something new into its city, is it beautiful enough for Toronto? And his conclusion was that clearly we have allowed a lot into this city that is not beautiful enough. We don't set the bar too high enough, excuse me. But again, my question is, do we have any way of lowering the bar, so to speak, in terms of preventing people from creating ugliness in our city? Or is it really up to the developer to decide to throw up a piece of condominium on the lakeshore that blots out the sky with something completely undistinctive?
That gets back to the idea of co-responsibility for solutions again. The development community in Toronto has been focusing on condo projects for the last little while for a whole number of economic reasons. And the basics there is you get in and you get out as quickly as you can, maintain or keep your costs low, maintain your profit margins, and move on to the next project. So there really isn't a long-term commitment to a particular neighborhood or a community as a result of that. There are some changes in economics now where developers are starting to build more rental accommodation and being a little more committed to the long-term aspects of a neighborhood. But while the city can regulate certain things, we are constrained as to what we can do in terms of architecture and detailing and things like that.
You have a $3.8 million budget to do all the things we're talking about, and there have been suggestions of late from City Council that $1 million of that be peeled off and sent for tsunami relief.
I heard that this morning for the first time just as it came in. That's a choice the City Council is going to have to make. It would be a very, very difficult thing for me to say that we shouldn't be investing or helping those who are in greater need than us. So if City Council decides that they need to make this kind of a decision, well, we'll just have to scale back on what we can do for next year.
Disappoint you that beautification would be considered expendable? They may have found that $1 million in someone else's budget than yours.
It's got to come out of some pocket someplace. And the $3.8 million is a figure that's derived from a number of different budgets. It's not just one that sits in the Urban Development Services pot right now. So if that's what they decide to do, that's what they decide to do, and we'll just have to adjust our plans for 2005 to make sure that we can achieve those small steps that really need to be done first.
Good luck.
Thank you, Andy.
Ted Tindorf is Toronto's chief planner. This week we're planning to tap into some other ideas of how the city can become a little better looking, more beautiful, more lovable. We'd like to hear your ideas too at 416-205-5807.
Well, if you're coming down into the core of this city, you'll find it a pretty good trip. It's been a good morning.
On the higher engine, speed up above. Scoot down the road, what's my number? My mom was in the Naval Reserve. When I was young, I carried a gun, but I never got the chance to serve. I did not serve. They call me baby driver. Once upon a pair of wheels, I hit the road and I'm gone. What's my number? I wonder how your engines feel. Scoot down the road. What's my number? I wonder how your engines feel.
Human suffering and misery. Bearing witness to the death and destruction of the Asian tsunami has been a traumatic experience for many journalists. And while a natural disaster of this magnitude is relatively rare, many journalists face danger and human misery on a regular basis in war zones and conflict zones. A recent psychiatric study has shown that war correspondents suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder at rates almost as high as military combatants. 1 in every 4 journalists who covers war zones will suffer from the disorder. Rohit Gandhi is a producer with CNN. He has seen war and he's seen what it can do to some of his colleagues. He took a sabbatical from his job and studied journalism at Carleton University. And while he was there, he prepared a documentary about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, in journalists, and we'll hear that in a moment. But Rohit Gandhi is on the phone from California. Good morning.
Good morning, Annie Maria.
Rohit, I want to get to your main research on covering wars in a minute, but first, what are you thinking as you watch the journalists covering the catastrophe unfolding in Asia after the tsunami?
The pictures that you've seen are just absolutely mind-boggling. You know, the kind of suffering that you see is unprecedented. People out there with their seeing all the dead bodies, seeing all the destruction. It can absolutely be devastating. I remember covering an earthquake just a few years ago where about 30,000 people had died. I know after I came back for about 2 months, I was very, very disturbed. I couldn't sleep very well for those 2.5 months. And absolutely, it must be devastating for those journalists as well to see that suffering, as well as sometimes even danger to your own life. You know, there's always a risk of this thing happening again.
Now, your documentary focuses on war coverage, and reporting from a war zone can be very dangerous business. We've seen that over and over again just this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. In Iraq alone, literally, dozens of journalists have already died covering. And there are journalists out there who die each year covering war zones and being in these war zones at the same time. They see a lot of suffering there as well. It's a very, very dangerous business.
You yourself cover wars, don't you?
Yeah, almost a year, one war a year and maybe a disaster or 2 a year. So, yeah, I do get out there quite a fair bit.
And this whole issue of post-traumatic stress syndrome, is it getting enough attention?
Not enough at all, actually. And so when I got out to study this topic a few years ago, I realized that there hadn't been any study done. Only one major research had been done, and that was about it. And so it has never gotten any attention whatsoever. But now I think there is a little awareness, but there is ways to go, and companies need to understand, the people who work for these companies, that journalists out there are also really, really stressed.
Well, Rohit Gandhi, let's listen to your documentary.
It was just another day in a war zone. CNN producer Maria Fleet and her crew were out reporting live on TV about the Iraqi city of Tikrit. It was a stronghold of Saddam Hussein's loyalists. Viewers around the world watched them on a grainy, jumpy image fed by a satellite video phone.
But Tikrit, no coalition forces. Tikrit, no fighting.
The CNN crew drove into Tikrit, but felt more threatened than they had expected. They decided to leave, but the decision came too late.
Okay, that's gunfire.
By this time, soldiers in pickup trucks were following them and shooting at them.
We're okay. Under fire. That confirmed.
It's pretty clear.
My fear was, we just don't want to be near these guys. Let's just get away. Let's get away. And I was just telling him, go, go, go.
Months later, Fleet shows me the videotape at CNN's world headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, and explains what happened as they sped away.
Most of the bullets came through the back window, most around the level of the headrest and the seat, like right shoulder height or a little higher, a little lower. And one hit my driver right across the top of his head, just like sliced across the top of his head and exited through the front windshield.
As Fleet's truck was racing out of the city, the soldiers in the pickup truck came up beside it, shouting to her injured driver, telling him to pull over. He kept shouting back, and Fleet was worried.
You passed him? He's behind us.
Then the worst happened. Fleet was shot.
This is where the bullet hit, right here. So you can see that it just barely hit the plate. It barely hit the plate and then ricocheted up.
She shows me her bulletproof vest.
Fragments
the bullet hit almost at the level of her neck, but she was lucky, as her bulletproof vest deflected the bullet.
That's where we found part of the bullet ricocheted up and grazed across the back of my head. And I did feel that, although I don't remember feeling any pain. I just instinctively put my hand back there, so I know I felt something. And when I drew my hand back and looked at it, it was covered with blood, and that's a pretty scary thing to see, that your head is bleeding enough to just cover your hand with blood immediately.
Are you okay there? This is Levon Sivens. He's driving his 11-year-old daughter Tamara and his 5-year-old son Garrigan to a judo class. He's a former reporter for the Montreal Gazette and lives in a 3-bedroom, semi-detached home in a quiet neighborhood in Montreal. I met him a few years ago in a very different setting. I was producing for CNN in northern Afghanistan, and he had approached me for a ride towards the front lines. The whole journey was only 25 kilometers, but a tough one. It took almost 4 hours. The roads were bad with potholes, and it also involved crossing a river in a truck. As we approached the front lines, I realized he wasn't wearing a bulletproof vest. We were just behind the Northern Alliance front and in the direct line of fire of the Taliban troops. I had an extra bulletproof vest sitting in the truck, and I offered it to him. Sivens and I and dozens of journalists were waiting for the big battle between the Northern Alliance and the Taliban. That attack was launched on November 11, 2001. We had set up a makeshift base camp on the bank of a river almost a kilometer from the front. The journalists were watching U.S. warplanes bomb the front lines. Later that night, the Northern Alliance general declared that all the Taliban fighters had fled. The alliance began to march forward, and the reporters wanted to go along. The general agreed and took Sivens and others along on an armored personal carrier.
As we came out of turn of the crater, we just were suddenly ambushed by a group of 5 or 6 Taliban soldiers who fired machine guns and then fired a rocket-propelled grenade on us.
In the chaos, 3 reporters fell off the armored vehicle, but Sivens managed to stay on as they sped to safety through the night. When they got back to camp, they realized 3 reporters were missing. A little later that night, the body of one of the reporters was recovered. It was Joanne Sutton, a French print reporter.
It was a very sad scene because she was lying on top of that APC, at the back of the APC, and even these Northern Alliance soldiers had seen a lot in their lives, just shaking their heads in disbelief. Her back was completely covered in blood, and she was basically lying in a pool of blood there.
Somebody had to bring Sutton's body back to the base camp, so Sivens volunteered. He was made to sit on top of the armored personal carrier holding her body. He recalls the 4-hour journey.
You actually feel how the warmth of the body disappears as the rigorous mortis sets in. I had to hold her hand. I had used pieces of material that from my first aid kit to tie her chin, and so her mouth doesn't stay. And I had tied her legs and arms to one arm to hooks that just are there on the. But I had to hold her left hand so she doesn't fall over. And by the time in the 4 hours it took, you physically feel at first when you hold the hand, the person might be, it's still warm, it still has this tender feeling. The person might be as well sleeping. But and it's very, very sad and unsettling to realize that, this person that you exchanged a smile just a couple of hours ago is there and lying dead. And at the same time, realizing that you were in the same position just hours ago. It could have been you.
This can be the life of journalists in war zones. They too often come face to face with death and destruction. Dr. Anthony Feinstein is convinced this horror has an impact on journalists who go through hell to bring back stories for their audiences.
Major depression, so clinically significant depression.
Feinstein is a psychiatrist at the Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. He's recently completed research on the stress and trauma experienced by journalists who cover war zones.
When you hear what they've witnessed and what they've experienced, you realize that the levels of trauma that they are subjected to are enormous, are considerable. There is no journalist who's not had a close shave with death. On multiple occasions, many of the journalists had been themselves wounded, shot, hit by shrapnel, assaulted, gone through mock executions. Many of them had lost very close friends, very, very close friends, people whom they'd established a very tight bond with over many years.
Feinstein became interested in journalists after treating two of them for a mental disorder in 1997. He says those two patients made a very quick recovery, but made him realize that media organizations had nothing in place to help journalists traumatized by war. The two reporters approached him after being referred by their family doctors. Feinstein personally interviewed 140 war journalists and says he was surprised to hear their stories.
Being on a street in Grozny when suddenly a bombardment comes down and, within seconds, just looking around you at a square littered with, human remains and people without legs who are still alive calling out for help and having to respond to that, what to do and feeling this incredible fear yourself because the next bombardment's on its way and there are these people who are imploring you to assist them. Very, very vivid images like that the journalists take away with them. And, because they're so skilled with words or because they're so skilled with images, when they tell you about it, they create this very vivid recollection.
Feinstein points out that guilt is a big stressor.
I think guilt comes into it at times, undoubtedly. I think, what to do under certain circumstances when people have been very badly injured and wounded and need help, and you're there to record the event, and at the same time you're a human being and, you can't ignore it. And often how do you help people who in some ways are beyond help? How do you assist a man on a square in Grozny who's lost his legs, who's still alive, and the next bombardment is coming in? What can you do? And honestly, to be practical, there's very little. And yet at the same time, it's very hard to walk or run away from a situation like that.
Feinstein also points out that there is a large group of journalists who reject the idea they're being adversely affected by war.
I think there still remains a certain reluctance on the part of some of their colleagues to acknowledge it. I think there's also a degree of naivete amongst the journalists in terms of their own recognition of what's going on. So I've certainly come across journalists who've had a number of very classic symptoms of, say, PTSD, for example, but who hadn't made sense of what they were. They hadn't quite worked out why they were not feeling right, why their emotions were all over the show, which sounds, somewhat surprising, but I think it does speak to a naivete within some of your profession.
Moving now to Chris Kramer. If anyone had a reputation for being a tough guy...
Chris Kramer is the managing editor of CNN. He's at a discussion in New York about trauma and stress in journalists. Kramer is also the honorary president of the Board of Safety of International Journalists. He's been in the business of international television journalism for nearly 3 decades. He says he too is surprised it has taken the industry so long to recognize the obvious.
It's extraordinary that an industry which is populated by so many bright people can be so remarkably stupid when it comes to something like safety. No member of the armed forces, no fireman, no member of the emergency services goes off to do what they do. A fireman doesn't fight a fire unless he or she has had proper training, proper equipment, and understands what to do about it if they encounter something stressful when they're doing it. And yet the media profession, up until fairly recently, somehow thought they were immune from all this rather unnecessary stuff. That's changing. It hasn't completely changed. There are still parts of the industry, particularly parts of the print industry, that don't really get safety and certainly don't get the notion that they can be affected by what they cover, which is, if you like, the next area of work for all of us.
Kramer was held hostage in the Iranian embassy in London in 1980 and recalls that he himself was against the idea of getting psychiatric help.
I was offered twice by the BBC and once by the British Home Office psychiatric care after that, and rejected it. Because for me it was, if you like, it was a sign of defeat for me. I wasn't prepared to concede to myself, let alone the outside world, that I somehow might be affected by that short, but for me, very painful experience. I would not make that mistake again, and when I speak to staff at CNN, I tell them, listen, you can go through years of anguish like I did, or you can do something about it. It is possible to do something about it.
Feinstein says the lack of education about trauma and stress in war zones is putting more journalists at risk.
A journalist gets into a zone of conflict. He or she has a very traumatic event happen to them. They're troubled by it, understandably. They have difficulty sleeping because of it. They have nightmares. They find that they cannot fall asleep because of recurrent thoughts or recollections of the event. And so they think, oh, well, I've got to get a good night's sleep. I can't work without sleep. I'm waking up frequently. I'm just going to use whiskey or whatever, take a good stiff drink. And so they start using alcohol as a hypnotic, as a way of falling asleep. And they start self-medicating with alcohol, which is not uncommon. But what that does is unlock a whole host of new difficulties, because it runs a risk of getting a person dependent on alcohol. And so they start getting themselves into a mess, not knowing how to get out of it. And I've certainly seen a scenario like that happen on many occasions.
Back in peaceful Montreal, Gazette reporter Sivins and his wife Emily are tidying up their kitchen after a delicious Armenian meal of kebabs, tomatoes and flatbread. Sivins says life in Montreal is normal as he knows it. He says what he has seen and gone through elsewhere has been quite difficult to handle, but he's been able to keep his head above water. His wife Emily is quick to point out she did notice a slight change in his behavior after he returned from the war in Afghanistan, but she was prepared for it.
I expected him to come back changed, because he witnessed the death of his friends, and he actually had a near-death experience himself. I just found him a bit just quieter than usually, and less sociable than he used to. Just slowly things came back to the way they were.
Being subjected to near-death situations is traumatizing. Trauma manifests itself in multiple forms. Flashback is one. Sivins says the whole incident unfolded in front of his eyes a year after it happened.
I was actually training at the Canadian Forces base in Kingston, where they teach peacekeepers, and Canadian Forces had offered a couple of dozen reporters the same course that on security that Canadian peacekeepers go through before assignments. It was very traumatic because it brought up very sudden memories, because the officer who was teaching course on personal safety in war zone, without realizing that I was one of the survivors of this episode, had pictures of the three of them, Joan, Walker, and Pierre, on the projector. And I lifted my hand and I just saw them on the projector, and they're smiling, and it really hit me. It was very close to the anniversary. It was just a few days away from the second anniversary. I think it was the only time where I had anything resembling a flashback incident that very often is associated with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Maria Feet has settled back into Atlanta. She sits with me for lunch at a sports grill at the CNN Center. She is happy to be back, but says every now and then her memory goes back to the point where she thought it was all over.
Yeah, I sometimes, and I don't really know what triggers it. I mean, that moment when the bullet came in that hit me and I was crouching down and, my head was kind of down near the dashboard by the radio. That's the moment I sort of see the radio there by my face, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is how my life is going to end. I mean, that's not a good feeling.
Both Fleet and Sivan say they don't feel they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, but the scars that a near-death experience can leave are deep. Sivan says he knows the difference between a stress disorder and painful memories. He says on his travels he has met many journalists who show signs of PTSD, but are not aware of it.
I had seen people in Uzbekistan in their hotels, so people who had just come out of Afghanistan, who displayed some of the symptoms without realizing. Binge drinking, anxiety attacks. It was very obvious to me. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I have seen so many people having these problems that when you talk to them and you try to explain to them, that in 2 cases when I've actually told people that you might have a post-traumatic stress disorder, they don't believe you. And then in a few minutes say, well, you mean other people go through this too? And it's quite liberating for them too to realize that they're not going mad. This is not something that is happening just to them.
CNN's Chris Kramer says the approach to dealing with mental stress in war should be direct and proactive.
When you come back from a overseas trip or a war zone, there is nothing more natural than taking your clothing to a laundry. For me, there's nothing more natural than when you come back from experiencing something unpleasant that you take your head to a laundry as well.
Feinstein says the high rate of post-traumatic stress among war journalists is a concern but not surprising, considering the kind of jobs they do. The solution to the problem, he says, is not a difficult one.
Education is essential, and a process of educating journalists about these issues is very important. It can be done very quickly, very efficiently, with a number of seminars that journalists should be invited to attend. It should not be made mandatory. I never believe that you can enforce this kind of structure on people. So it has to be a self-directed process, but I think through a couple sessions of education, you can accomplish an enormous amount. And so I think journalists themselves are going to be open to education. And I think from education, everything flows. That if people know what the symptoms are, if they understand the psychological risks of this kind of work, if they can appreciate the kinds of difficulties they can get into, if they understand the hazards of self-medicating with alcohol, then, they're informed journalists and they're much wiser and they'll be in a better position to recognize their own difficulties.
We've been listening to a documentary by Rohit Gandhi. He is with me by phone from California this morning. Rohit, what, if anything, are various news agencies doing about post-traumatic stress disorder in journalists?
There is just a little awareness, I'd say. There are large companies like, the CNN or CBC or the BBC now do work with their journalists, trying to understand that the journalists are going to go through a lot in these disasters, and they are making efforts in providing some help before and some help after, or when people are going through this. But most news organizations leave their journalists out there to cover these disasters. They see a lot, they go through a lot, and are impacted for life.
Okay, Rohit Gandhi, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria.
Rohit Gandhi is a producer with CNN. Well, that's it for The Current this morning. We're going to leave you today with a survivor's first-hand account of the tsunami that struck last week. Sharon Radamorty is a sociology professor at York University in Toronto. On the morning of December 26th, he was visiting his family in the small village of Bentota on the southern coast of Sri Lanka. We're going to leave you now with his story.
It was about, say, 9:10 or 9:15 in the morning. And I heard lots of people screaming and running after me, and I didn't understand exactly what was going on. So I turned back, and I asked somebody, what exactly is going on, why everyone is running. And they said in Sinhalese language, the sea is coming in, the sea is coming in. The water was everywhere. And initially, I had no clue whatsoever as to what was going on. The only thing I thought was, we better leave this place. And, I was carrying my niece. She's, say, about 4. And then, we had to run. So that was my only thought. And all I had was a small handbag where my Canadian passport. And, what really occurred to me at that point was, the great instinct to survive, run. And, we started running. Everyone started running. But we couldn't cross the road because the water flow was so heavy and so fast.
and all I could hear was the glass, the broken glass, and then all kinds of small kids crying. So that was the only thing, and then the sound of the water rushing in. It was so huge, so fast. It is indescribable the way it hit, the way it created the crashing sound. I had to walk to the water in the waist deep water, and we were completely. I was wet, and then my knees fell in the water, so I had to pick her up. So I was holding on to her very tight. I saw all kinds of things floating, and kind of like the broken chairs, and then some stuff from the breakfast table, and then the cushion, and some clothes. All kinds of things were floating very fast. So it was kind of really difficult to negotiate all those kind of things, and then cross the road, and then climb up on the other side. The other side was the railway station, which was situated on a slightly higher area. So our target was to go there. So we managed to reach there with great difficulty. On the platform of the station, there was about 3 or 4 injured people, bleeding, and everyone was crying for help. And only the next day, I began to realize the magnitude of destruction and how miraculously we survived the tsunami, and it was unbelievable. And I think there is no rational answer or a reason for me sitting here and talking to you at this point.
I'm Andy Berry. This is CBC Radio 1 in Toronto, and it's time now for Toronto at 10. This morning, a meeting with Martin. The Prime Minister is sitting down with representatives of Toronto's South Asian communities to talk about aid after the tsunami. We'll speak with a member of the Canadian Tamil Congress who's been invited to this meeting. He'll tell us what he hopes would come out of it. We'll update you on the weather, but first, here's the news.
From CBC Toronto, the hourly news, it is 10 o'clock, overcast, 2 degrees. Good morning, I'm Jill Dempsey. The latest official estimate is 140,000 people dead after the tsunami disaster in Asia 8 days ago. That includes at least 5 Canadians. Prime Minister Paul Martin has doubled Canada's donation of aid to $80 million. The Disaster Assistance Relief Team will also be sent to help. International Affairs Minister Pierre Pettigrew and International Cooperation Minister Eileen Carroll will visit the region. Today, Martin is scheduled to speak with Asian community leaders in Toronto. The United States has now committed $350 million in aid and has sent troops, ships, helicopters, and forensic experts. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell arrives in the area today for a first-hand look at the devastation. The difficult job of identifying the dead is only beginning. In Thailand, officials have identified less than 10% of an estimated 2,500 bodies. The biggest problem is decomposition, because there simply isn't enough refrigeration space to store the bodies. In Thailand, officials have identified less than 10%. Ontario's former Chief Coroner Dr. James Young is part of a team of forensic experts that traveled to Thailand to help with that task. Young says the team is facing a growing number of bodies without an identity.
There is virtually no hope that everyone is going to be identified. We're still trying to establish exactly how many people perished, and then we have to match that against how many ultimately we can identify. But it's a situation where there will be Canadians identified, but at this point we have huge numbers of bodies, and we have no idea where they're from or how many are going to be identified.
Young is familiar with this grim and difficult job. He traveled to New York to help identify the victims of the September 11th disaster. As many as 7,000 foreign tourists are still missing. Most of them are Europeans who were taking a break at the beaches of South Asia at the height of the holiday season. From London, Derek Stoffel has more on the response of people across Europe.
Much of Europe spent the weekend mourning. The Scandinavian countries have suffered the largest losses, more than a week after the disaster, and so many families still have no word about the fate of loved ones. In Sweden alone, close to 3,000 people are still missing. Denmark, Finland, and Norway also held a national day of mourning. In Copenhagen, the Danish Prime Minister and royal family attended a memorial service yesterday. Louis Michel, the European Union's commissioner responsible for the aid effort, says people are responding to the tragedy.
What will be very important is the second phase for the international community, the phase of rehabilitation and reconstruction.
In Britain alone, where 40 people have been declared killed by the disaster, close to $140 million in aid has so far been committed. A spokesperson for the charity Save the Children said the response has been unprecedented, noting that even young children are walking into the charity shops and donating their allowances to try to save the children of Asia suffering from this disaster. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, London.
For some in the GTA, it will be the first time they're together after the earthquake and tsunamis. Jean Carter has this report on how schools are preparing to help students affected by the disaster.
There are thousands of children in the Toronto area from families with ties to the disaster region. At some schools, they're the majority of the students. Vicky Bismillah is a superintendent of education in York Region, just north of the city. Her board is calling in a special team used during tragic events such as 9/11 or the death of a teacher.
These are psychologists, attendance counselors, social workers that are available to counsel students who need help.
Schools expect even students who are not directly affected will have questions. Grade 7 teacher Rashmi Jani says she'll take her lead from students.
We don't whip up our pencils and start with our language and our math, but we try to come to terms or grieve if need be.
Superintendent Vicky Bismillah understands children like their parents will want to do something for the people who have lost so much. Schools are being encouraged to fundraise. That's what 8-year-old Katani Shuragnin has already started to do.
I've been collecting money for the poor people in Sri Lanka and India.
How much have you collected?
About $17.
Teachers and principals will have information on how different faiths pray and mourn. It's all in preparation for the largest tragic event these schools have had to deal with. Jean Carter, CBC News, Toronto.
Right now, Andy, it is overcast and 2 degrees.
Paul Martin will be meeting as well this morning with members of Toronto communities affected by the tsunami. That meeting scheduled for 11:30 at the Delta Hotel. Gary Anandasangari is with the Canadian Tamil Congress. He's been invited to the meeting. He's on the line with us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Andy.
What will your message to Mr. Martin be?
Well, there are a couple of messages. First of all, I think there's an obligation for us to thank the Prime Minister and the government for the commitments that they've made to the region. But more importantly, what we want to tell the Prime Minister is that we want to ensure that aid does go to the north and east of Sri Lanka as well as all affected region in an equitable manner. And that's something that we will ensure, that we want to ensure in the long term as well as the short term.
And I assume you're going to be telling him you don't trust the Sri Lankan government to do that.
Well, I think there are clear indications coming from Sri Lanka that they're not to be trusted. I mean, we've already had a number of aid vehicles that have been turned away by the Sri Lankan army as well as customs as for example, customs is giving them a hard time for when shipments are going through. So there's definitely an element of distrust between the government and the community, and therefore we want to ensure that any funds that are directed to Sri Lanka is certainly shared in an equitable manner so that everybody who needs the relief is able to get it.
And if you don't trust the government of Sri Lanka to see to it those funds are distributed to Tamil areas, can we absolutely be sure and trust that the money that is otherwise distributed to those areas won't go to the revolutionary activities and arms?
Well, there are absolutely a number of NGOs that are working specifically on the relief effort, and I think they have a long track record of working both in the north and east as well as other part of the island. So there's definitely those are the areas that those are the avenues for channeling the funds, and I think we've already seen a number of Canadian NGOs already there. But we also have the Tamil Rehabilitation Organization, for example, who's played a role there for over 20 many years, and I think they have a critical role to play. I mean, what's important is that the funds that do go there are monitored, and I think that will ensure that the money does go to the people who need it the most.
More Tamils have left Sri Lanka for Canada than any other country in the world, so I assume Mr. Martin's in a particularly delicate position diplomatically when it comes to dealing with the Sri Lankan government if he sends them a signal that he wants to go around them because he or you or the people he hears from doesn't trust them. How does he deal with that?
Well, what needs to be clear, Andy, is that, we're not saying that funds should not go to the Sri Lankan government. I think funds that are going to the South could very well be directed to through the Sri Lankan government, and I think they have a definite role to play in the overall picture. What we're saying is that as a government, it's important for us to ensure that funds that are directed to Sri Lanka are equitably distributed, and in part that requires us to ensure that money does go to the North and East. So what we do need is more of a mechanism to measure, quantifiably measure the equitable distribution than anything else. So it's not about circumventing the government or bypassing them. It's just about ensuring that we do have equitable distribution.
The last word about what you've heard lately from your own family and the people you come from.
I think last night I spoke to a number of students who are here from Ontario in Sri Lanka. They've been there since December 20th. One of my colleagues I spoke to last night after 2.5 weeks, and it was certainly they're just devastated, and I think they're really they're overwhelmed with shock and horror. They were right in the carnage. They saw, for example, at one of the orphanages they were at on the 23rd or 24th of December, they saw 165 kids, and they opened a new library. They brought in books for them, and then 3 days later they'll go back and there are only 30 kids remaining. And this is just an absolute devastation for those who witnessed it, but certainly for those who are directly affected by it. And I think we're looking. I mean, they're coming back probably by the end of the week, early next week, and they have stories to tell us that I think will really cause us a great deal of solidify
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but we're going to run out of time in a few seconds. Good luck with Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Andy.
Gary Anangasangari is with the Canadian Tamil Congress in Toronto.
And we will continue to follow the Prime Minister's visit throughout the day on CBC News. Right now it is overcast and 2 degrees. Sounds Like Canada is next.
Good morning and welcome to Sounds Like Canada for January 3rd, 2005. I'm Kelly Ryan, and I have the pleasure of sitting in for Sheila Rogers, who's enjoying an extended holiday over the next 2 weeks. How was your holiday season? If you live on the East Coast, I know it was a weird one weather-wise, at least. I was among the hundreds, maybe thousands, who were home visiting for Christmas and got to spend a little extra time there thanks to that wild blizzard that hit on the 27th. It reminded me that in the Maritimes, the snow sometimes falls up or sideways thanks to the wind. And then once planes could fly again, I was on a plane on the other coast, joining thousands of others in the mountains of Whistler, praying for just a few new flakes of powder to make that New Year's Day skiing better. What a funny country. This morning, I'll talk with a father and son who sat through that Nova Scotia snowstorm together in the comforts of home, but have now packed...
On the dark tool, it seems to be fairly cumbersome, and in areas of natural disaster such as this, the difficulties of getting there. Do we need to take another look at the way we provide this kind of relief?
Well, I think that the world is learning that there have got to be smaller, quicker ways of moving. I think that DART fulfills a very important purpose, but I think that technology is constantly improving, and I think that certainly in terms of providing aid to stricken areas and to people like this, we really got to be at the absolute cutting edge of whatever ability, whatever technologies are available.
You have been listening to a live news conference in Toronto by Prime Minister Paul Martin, who confirmed an earlier announcement by the Defence Minister Bill Graham that Canada's Disaster Assistance Response Team, known as DART, will leave within the next 48 hours for Sri Lanka. It will be, said the Prime Minister, fully operational, he said, by next week. A meeting by Mr. Martin earlier in the afternoon with community leaders, preceded by a meeting at a Markham school this morning, where about 70% of the students at this school are from Sri Lanka, and the Prime Minister used that opportunity to reassure the students that his government was doing everything it could for those who have relatives in Sri Lanka. The Prime Minister was also asked about what this all meant. He said you can ask why as a religious person, and he said he simply could not find the answers. I'm Robert Fisher again. You've been listening to a live news conference from Toronto by Prime Minister Paul Martin.
That is called 100 Years of Heart, and it is the anthem for Saskatchewan's centennial celebration. 2005...
formerly known as the Supportive Housing Coalition. If you know the extension of the person you'd like to reach, please key it in now, or for access by name, press 9. You may reach reception at any time by pressing 0. If you are calling to report a building emergency, please press 0 to reach the receptionist. For address and fax information, press 400. You may leave a message here after the prompt. Thank you.
Today is Friday, December the 31st. The Supportive Housing workers have left the office for today and will not be returning until Tuesday, January 4th, due to the New Year's holiday. Please leave a message. One of us will get back to you when we return to the office. If this is an emergency and you require immediate assistance, please phone 416-703-9266. Thanks a lot. Happy New Year. Have a great day.
Thanks. What's up? This is, I have to admit that it's not exactly...
days before our 100th anniversary.
Okay, that makes sense. And so what did you do over New Year?
It's British. We're calling from Toronto Police Communications. Just calling to apologize for the delay. I know you've been waiting a while. Unfortunately, it's been a bit on the busy side, but we're trying our best to have an officer contact you as soon as possible. Thanks for your patience. Bye. End of message.
Say it one more time.
Next message. Join us, Toronto Police calling. I know it's very late in the morning. It's 2:26 a.m. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get over to see you. I did speak to the neighbor that pushed you. I think that she is a little bit ill, and we're going to be looking into that. Now, when you get up or you receive this message, would you call us back if you wish to report the assault? The event number is Lima 131615. 131615. Just ask to reopen that. As for your neighbor, like I said, I think she's a little bit not quite there, so I don't even think she realizes what she's done. But, like I said, when you get up, call us back at that number and have us reopen that event. Thank you. End of message.
I'd say about the 40-50, some of them had old sweaters and aged sweaters and that, like, you know.
They didn't have the...
First time in a week, Ottawa is set to revise its list of missing and dead now that forensic experts like Dr. James Young have been able to identify more bodies. The Globe reports the number of dead is expected to go up. Jones Gall, 680 News.
U.S. President Bush is examining options for tsunami relief. He is meeting with Secretary of State Colin Powell this morning. Powell has just returned from a tour of South Asia.
He says he'll use the session to discuss long-term assistance to regions devastated by the killer wave.
UNICEF has confirmed 2 cases of measles in survivors of Indonesia's tsunami. That confirmation is raising fears that the highly contagious and potentially deadly viral infection could take a hold on devastated Sumatra Island. The UN Children's Agency is in the midst of a campaign to vaccinate 600,000 people against the disease, which can be deadly to children if it's not treated. The mass vaccination drive in the Sumatra region began last week and is expected to take 3 weeks to complete.
You're listening to 680 News. Well, 2 weeks after the tsunami, a story of survival this morning. A 22-year-old Indonesian man has been pulled from the water by a passing cargo ship. It's the third such similar story. A pregnant woman was rescued by a Malaysian tuna ship after clinging to a palm tree for 5 days in the Indian Ocean. Another man drifted for 8 days before a Japanese cargo ship spotted him.
Still ahead?
If you're driving into the city today, better make sure that your license, insurance, and ownership documents are with you. I'm Carl Hansky. Police launch Project All in Order.
And the Consumer Report, 680 News Time, 9:36.
Metro Canada presents Understanding Canadian Weather. Today's term, a winter storm watch. When, after a severe storm, you watch...
Good morning. Today is Monday, January 10th, and this is 550 Kingston Road Site Office, Mainstay Housing. I'm either with a tenant or I'm on another call. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message, and I will return your call shortly. If this is an emergency, please dial our head office directly at 416-703-9266 and press 04.
Celebration, and then we have the Stampede in June, and in
Those are normal things. We always have those things. Do you have anything that's going to just step aside there and say this?
To make sure that those who've been hit and touched are helped. And that is part of, obviously, one's religion, the ability to deal with other people who are suffering through tragedy and make it part of your own. But you also ask the reason behind it, and you don't find the answer there.
Mr. Martin, British Tourism Secretary Jack Straw a very short while ago announced that he is now prepared to declare British citizens missing as British citizens dead in this disaster. And I'm wondering if you're prepared to make that same statement, that same declaration for the missing Canadians at this point.
No.
Why not?
Because I still think that there's hope. And I think that if you take a look at earlier events, earthquakes where weeks later people are found alive, I'm not prepared to close that door yet.
What is the missing at this point?
Well, it's still the numbers the last numbers I've seen are the ones we've seen for the last couple of days, which is somewhere upwards of 150.
Christian Grégoire, Radio-Canada.
Monsieur Martin, ce matin, plusieurs personnes de la communauté ont...
There were many people from the ethnic communities who expressed some concerns. They want to be sure that Canada's money will be given to the people who really need it. What guarantees do you have to offer? The question was put in two different ways. It was put in general terms. We're giving money to NGOs that are very well known, and we'll wait for these NGOs to make concrete proposals.